Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for creating time for us this morning. News Check begins right now, a program that seeks to explore issues shaping conversation in the country and beyond. And today being the 21st of September 2021, we are marking 8 years since that terror attack at the Westgate shopping mall that led to the death of about 70 people. And of course also left many wounded. And we're not just talking about the physical wounds, we are talking about the emotional scars that people are living with till today. But Kenya has really suffered quite a number of terror attacks, and we are, just on the journey to bettering our terror management, and of course just ensuring that information is passed to the populace with regards to how we can be able to play a role in managing terror in our country. We all remember the 1998 bomb blast. We remember the Mpeketoni terror attack in Lamu. We remember the Garissa University attack that left over 140 people dead, and I can go on and on. But that is not what we want to focus on this particular morning. What we want to look at is the journey as we soldier on, and what lessons we have learned from those terror attacks, and what you and I can be able to do as our role in helping our country better manage these particular terror attacks. And that is our conversation this morning. And a little bit later, we will also be talking about the pain at the pump, the increased fuel prices in the country. That, of course, has led to a lot of debate and conversations about the rising cost of living in the country. But that will be coming a little bit later. For now, I want to engage a panel of two gentlemen who really have a depth of knowledge in this particular subject. And I'll begin from the gentleman on my far left there. I'm sure he's not a new face as well. We have seen him in this space of peace building. His name is Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali. Thank you so much for creating time for us. He's the Secretary General of Global Network of Religion for Children, also known as GNRC. Thank you so much for creating time for us. Now, Mustafa has really done a lot in peace building. He has even won an award for that. Thank you for creating time for us, Mustafa, once again. And of course, Dr. Oscar Githua, he'll be taking us into the mind of, first of all, the terrorists, and also our minds as a populace, and how we can be able to understand how this whole network of terrorism works and what we can do different in managing it. Dr. Oscar is a forensic psychologist. Thank you so much for creating time. Both gentlemen also are consulting for the National Counter-Terrorism Center. Thank you, and we appreciate your time once again.
Thank you so much.
Of course, today we mark 8 years since that terror attack at the Westgate Mall that left about 70 people dead. As we mark this anniversary, what is going on in your minds, as key stakeholders in the war against terror and in peace building? Let me begin with you, Mustafa.
Thank you very much. Today is not only the 8th anniversary of the Westgate attack, it is also the International Day of Peace. Yeah. So the terrorists decided to select on that day to come and commit horrendous acts of murder on the Kenyan soil, and basically they desecrated that very day. Desecrated what they claim to stand for, desecrated everything that is peaceful. And it just tells you what kind of people those that attacked Westgate were, those that supported them are, and what we need to do to defeat them and to really go on the offensive to ensure that they do not recruit our children, they do not radicalize our young people to join these groups. And 8 years, Kenya has come a long way in ensuring that we do not repeat the same mistakes. Our guards are much better, and that we actually are able to prevent and to fend off this kind of terrorists from carrying out their attacks.
All right, thank you for that. And of course, from your own perspective as well, what is it that you find pivotal as we mark this anniversary, and also talking about the International Day of Peace? What is it that is pivotal as we mark this particular day?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really I'm blessed to be here. I think 8 years after Westgate, my reflections are around the question of resilience as a people, preparedness as a country, and all our systems around security, and especially when it comes to terrorism in this country. So what I think is that back then we were not as prepared as we are right now. Back then we were taken down on an unfortunate journey of learning because of what my brother Dr. Mustafa has talked about as desecration of this day. And I think that as Kenyans, we were violated, but then we learned how to stand up and say that we are not going to be defeated by people who actually want to ruin our way of life. For me, what is pivotal especially is there's been a change also in the way we respond to these issues. For example, if you look at the security response back then and now, and then if you look at the psychological response as well, while we mounted a very good response in 2013, which was, I guess, historic in its coordination and effectiveness, I think that right now we have a better way of doing it, which is still coordinated. It's really focused on the people. And because as a people, we have to actually, first of all, show people who want to attack us and harm us that we actually care for our own. And when you think about survivors of attacks like Westgate, Garissa, 14 Riverside complex attack, you think about how do we embrace each other as a people? How do we then move on? And are we ready to do it? So, of course, as a person who was involved in that all the way from 2013, I can proudly tell you that we have trained more psychologists than ever, more counselors more than ever. And I think mental health being a pivotal question in this country, we now need, we're actually even seeing the Ministry of Health itself, Ministry of Internal Security and Interior, when you actually look at all the moves that are being made around our country, they're all targeting mental health as a key area to actually focus on. So I think we've made a lot of progress to help our people recover in the event that anything like this was to happen again.
I like the optimism that you both gentlemen are sharing this morning, because I've attended quite a number of forums that discuss just, and sharing information and awareness on the issue of terror. And basically, one of the most fundamental things that is usually standing out in these forums is the fact that when we're talking about terror, let's be optimistic. Let's move to the space where we are picking ourselves up and moving, not staying in that state of being victimized and showing the terror group that we actually hit where it hurt most. But it's all about what are we learning? How are we moving? What are we doing different? And I like how you've started on that positive note. Let's talk about where the genesis of the matter, where it all begins. And I'll just stay on you, Dr. Oscar.
Yeah.
When a terror attack happens, what is usually the motive, and how should we respond to it?
Okay.
Take us into the mind of this person who is behind this particular attack, and the mind of this person who is receiving, he's on the receiving end.
Okay.
What are they thinking? Why are they doing it? And this person, how should they respond?
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll give a response, but I'll also defer part of the political angle of their motives to Dr. Mustafa, who can go a bit deeper in that. From my perspective, what I'll tell you is that I think for your viewers, that terrorism is not just about the attack. The attack is actually a signal of what terror is. Terrorism is about a battle of the hearts and minds of people. So it's basically about instilling so much fear that we change the way we live our life. It's about changing the way we conduct our business. For instance, if I give you an example of Westgate, after Westgate was attacked, a lot of people avoided malls and crowded areas, which of course ended up having an economic impact on people, and even anxiety, raising anxiety in the lives of people. And you can imagine that if that is what is going to happen every time you have an attack, then we do have that kind of general country anxiety, okay? So in their minds, they're thinking, let us go and send a message to a third party, which I'll allow Dr. Mustafa to speak about, that has some political goal. For example, if you're talking about bigger goals like, get out of a country like Somalia or something like that, if that's what they're trying to do, the message is not to the people they've attacked, but it's to the people who actually are governing the country where the people they've attacked live. Now, on the other hand, there's the people who've been affected. So imagine you woke up on that day, you went to the mall to do your business as usual, and then all of a sudden there's an attack like this that happens. The first thing that grips you is shock and terror. And so one of the effects of these attacks is what we call traumatic stress, and which could develop to post-traumatic stress disorder, which we do not pathologize everybody who was there, but it does develop in a few people. But then also I want to go a bit broader and say that the survivors, and I like the fact you said we don't look ourselves at ourselves as victims. We look at ourselves as survivors because we've walked out of it, and we do not want to. Victims are people who are helpless, but survivors are people who have a bit of hope and can do something to be able to rectify the situation. So we have 4 categories of survivors. The people who are at the site of the attack, maybe if it's a mall, then we have the first responders. That's the security agents themselves, the police officers who came to respond, KDF people who are there, St. John's Ambulance, Red Cross, whoever might have been there, ourselves who are psychologists who went to respond. So your first responders, of course, the community itself and the country, because it's us who've been invaded and attacked. But then also a category that people don't think about, the family members of the people who perpetrate it. Because you can imagine if you wake up and you're a mother, and then all of a sudden you see your son in the news, and he's done something so horrific.
Yeah, they're wanted, or they're
wanted, and now that's a huge traumatic step. And I think that what I'd like to educate the country about is that not all the times are the family members involved in knowing what happened. And so that group should not be demonized either, because they're also going through immense trauma. And so I think for me, that's why I can leave it for now as the genesis of where it begins, like the whole journey of healing, the journey of the pain that you have to walk with after a terror attack.
Thank you for also bringing in the family of that person who is involved in this terror group, because we never really think about that aspect, and that is where it begins, because even for these young people to join these terror groups, it's all about their background and how they are wired and what is happening, their circumstances at that particular time. That is what the terror group is using to lure them. I'd like you to add on what Dr. Oscar has said, you know, just the political aspect of it, the bigger picture of why terrorist attacks, you know, actually take place in the first place.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Gidua has talked about the whole psychological elements, the trauma that affects those people that are attacked. It affects the families of those whose member is also involved in carrying out those attacks. And it's so important, as Dr. Gidua has mentioned, that the healing in terms of psychological trauma that comes with all this is actually undertaken. Terrorism comes from Latin word teher, which means to cause, to tremble, to communicate that trembling, the terrorism, the fear to happen. So when these terrorists attacked Westgate, you know, the Westgate as a mall, the symbolism that came with that mall where the elites go to, that was not the primary target. The primary target, as Dr. Gidua mentioned, is actually the policymakers, is to cause the government to change its policy, perhaps on, as they said then, the terrorists, on Somalia and KDF having gone there. And so the terrorists are very selective in their targeting to ensure that the message will actually be conveyed, and that's where we normally, or rather then, and Kenya has come a long way in learning from this kind of targeting. It is a mind game that the terrorists are playing, and if we allow them to succeed in playing this mind game, they actually succeed. And we saw then how the media covered the Westgate terror attack.
I somehow knew you were going to go there.
Yes,
I somehow saw that coming.
We gave them, the media gave terrorists ample airtime to advertise their...
What Dr. Gidua would term as intelligent.
That's true. That's true. To advertise themselves. I remember myself, I was in a newsroom at 3 a.m. speaking about what is going on at Westgate with the cameras zooming in on the attack itself. They got that ample time to now communicate. They were using social media. Al-Shabaab actually is using Twitter, Facebook. They were online, and even the tech companies did not really understand how to deal with these people. They thought that, you know, just freedom of expression and association also meant that allowing terrorists to misuse those platforms. And we've come a long way to actually learn how to target the terrorists, to target their targeting of our minds so that they don't misuse our minds, they don't misuse those platforms and channels that are there to to terrorize our communities. And the media has come also a long way. You know, you no longer see when Dusit happened. You no longer see the media actually focusing on what the terrorist wants to convey.
Correct.
Instead, it's about condemnation, it's about resilience, it's about making this country a rally behind those that are the first responders that Dr. Gidwa talked about, to show the terrorists that, come on, you cannot terrorize us. You're not going to make us a fool of your strategies and tactics. And I'm glad to see that the multi-agency approach to which the security agencies have taken, to be on the offensive, not just in terms of the hardware, but also to attack the very ideological foundations of terrorism. And we are succeeding in this war. We just need to do more now.
We need to do more. I like what you've said about the media, and I'd like to really probe you more on this as we continue this conversation. You know, during Dusit, we saw the story angling was more around those who are doing great things, the Mama Chais who spent sleepless nights to help our soldiers, you know, the security agencies who are doing so much to rescue the survivors and all that. It was not about how hard we were hit at that time. It was about how we were managing the situation. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'd like to take you back on something you said concerning the bigger picture on why these terror attacks happen, and it's usually targeted to drive a particular agenda. I wanted to understand, in the case such as what you've cited, you know, when the terror group wants to, you know, inform ideology on certain policies to be changed, including even what you cited with KDF and Somalia, what is the best way to respond as the recipient of this, you know, terror attack? I mean, when you're caught up in that rock and a hard place, how do you respond? What's the best way to respond?
Thank you. For the general public who the terrorists, in the manner that they craft their messaging, look at the general public as very gullible, and so they are very sophisticated in the way they craft their messaging. In a report issued by the State Department in 2015, actually the US admitted that Daesh, ISIS, was much more sophisticated in the way they are carrying out their strategic communications, much more than the Americans in Iraq and Syria. And so they had to go into the mind of that terrorist to understand that terrorist in order to actually push back, carry out ideological pushback, so that they don't continue recruiting, intimidating the general population. The whole thing rests on ideological foundations. The terrorists, they know the buttons to press. They knew the buttons to press then. So there's a lot of religionization of politics. We were discussing with Dr. Gidwa, you know, when you talk about the caliphate, with Daesh trying to project themselves as the saviors of the Muslims and trying to establish a caliphate, it's a political game. It's not even religious. And so they have expertly religionized politics and also done the reverse of politicizing religion, so that that gullible person, young person who sees that perhaps they're going to be saved by Daesh, actually believe in their message. But we have gotten much more savvy to push back this kind of messaging, and with that there is less space for these terrorists to recruit, particularly in the physical platforms, like we saw 8 years ago. And now they have moved online, where they are doing a lot of damage and recruiting many young people, especially during this time, COVID-19 context, during lockdowns, where people are just in front of their TVs, their phones, their laptops, their computers, spending a lot more time online. The terrorists also have actually moved in that area and are on the dark web, running a riot there to recruit many young people.
All right. As you add on to that, the recruitment process, Dr. Gidwa, what are some of the fundamental things that these terror groups look out for, when they are shopping for members. Let me just use that basic term.
Okay.
So that as a society, we are more self-aware, because you even cited earlier that some families are not even aware that the young people in the family are part of a terror group.
True.
What is it that they're looking for? What are some of the gaps that probably we need to seal going forward?
Okay, thank you. So what I'll do, I'll answer your question in two prongs. The first thing is I'll talk about what they look for, but then I'll also answer on the piggyback of what Dr. Mustafa was talking about, the political part, but then say what we as a country have done, because there's also what we've done after the attacks that actually is helping to reduce the attacks, as you've seen over the past few years, and also to kind of solidify our resilience as a country. So in terms of what the terrorists look for, the first thing I want to talk about is vulnerability of our young people. And these vulnerabilities come in many kind of ways. They will target people who come from families that have a bit of strife and kind of like negativity going on, for example. And you know, there's this narrative about single mother households, which I'd like to dispel. I think that there are very many single mothers who are doing a great job at raising families. So that's not the point. The point is about supervision of kids. So you find that, you know, you have a child in a home, but then when they come home, they run into their bedroom. And as Dr. Mustafa has alluded to, they go online on their tablets or on their phones, but you don't know what content they're accessing. So you find them like getting, you know, radicalized online through the channels they access. Some of them through a dark web, some of them through even normal things like, you know, their websites. Even on YouTube, there used to be channels from terror groups that they'd follow. So then you find there's vulnerabilities from the family, some from the school setting, where you find that the way we used to be treated in school is not the way you treat the current generation. I remember when I was going to school, you know, teachers would be very harsh with you and really mete out a lot of things. But now you have to be really different on how you deal with young people, because if you do that, you could alienate them. And when you alienate them, all it will take for a recruiter is to come and show love to these young people. And acceptance. And then give them kind of an identity and belongingness, you know, fulfilling that need. So you find that even in the school space, there's that. Also, there are individual factors of young people. In Sheng, they say that vijana wenye hawana form. You know, so people who don't know, like basically, if you know, someone like we've had cases of people who are recruited and went to travel abroad because they didn't have anything they were doing. So their friends said, we're going to Somalia. Then they said, why are you guys going and leaving me behind? Then they go pack their bags and leave for Somalia with them. And that's also a thing. So you find community factors as well. There are communities that will never talk about any radicalization activities happening among them, because probably they fear to be victimized by security agencies or the government or whoever it might be. All this is paranoia, which might be based on some truth or not some truth sometimes. So you find that there's all that. Then, of course, the biggest one is the peer groups that young people belong to. If you belong to a peer group, a network that is mostly antisocial, and they actually are adhering to the ideology that Dr. Mustafa was talking about, most likely a young person will be radicalized easier than anybody else. Now, that's what the terror groups will look for when they're trying to get people to join their groups. And funny enough, they do not recruit kids that you call bad kids. It's like, if you look at the case studies that we know, they're always the brightest kids, the kids who get A's, the kids who are the most obedient in their homes, the kids who don't question anything. Those are the ones who they're targeting, because also in their ranks, they want very clever young people. Now, what does the country do then after those attacks? I think that we have now, through NCTC, having the National Strategy for Countering Violent Extremism, which is hinged on pillars that actually will protect our people against this scourge that is there. What I like about it is that it has now been actualized through the county action plans, which are customized per county. And the best thing about it, it's not really the government telling people what to do, but it's actually the people in the counties coming and saying, actually, these are the things that affect us, and therefore we're going to attack this problem using the things that are unique to us, so that the problems in Turkana County, Mandera County, Nakuru County, or wherever else are not the same. So therefore... So
they're contextualized.
Contextualized, exactly.
Depending on the region
where they
and
are.
Their needs.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
No, I was just going to finish by saying that, Dr. Mustafa probably would be better placed in talking about, differences in some of these areas that we've seen. Like if you look at a place like Isiolo, it's not the same as Mombasa, for instance, about when we see who has actually left, joined these groups. you find more young men and rarely women in Isiolo. But in Mombasa, you find both men and women. And so in Mombasa, so you find, so there's some issues that are ingrained within particular communities and particular regions that are very specialized.
All right. Also, as you add on what he has said, also tell us how this trend is mutating, because how they are doing it is not the ordinary way of how they used to do it way back. Talk to us about how this recruitment and the attacks are mutating. How do we need then to change our management and whatever we are doing to
yeah, Dr. Gilu has spoken about the contextual differences of where the recruits would come from, or where terrorist groups, in our case mainly Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab and ISIS recruit from, and the two ways of looking at it, the structural factors that actually push young people to join terror groups, and then there are the appeal factors that pull young people to join terror groups. Some of those structural factors, and Dr. Gidu has spoken to, include grievances. Grievance is always that starting point, and the grievance of that person in Lodwar is different from that in Isiolo, in Mombasa. There are grievances all over. What terrorist groups do is to actually expertly take advantage of that grievance and present themselves as the saviors. Confuse the mind of mainly the young people so that they actually join them.
So this messaging, it doesn't start on the obvious point of I want you to join a terror group.
No, it
I want you to really emphasize on that, because young people are watching. I want you, so that whoever they could be talking to or chatting with right now, they have an idea where
they take their time. They even come to the mosque and observe you. Are you very religious? They'll observe you for 3-4 months. So if they see you as being very religious, then they will come with you with religious messaging.
Right. So it's not. You really have to be careful.
You have to be careful. Now for girls, and we see more girls now actually going to join these groups. For girls, it's even more, it's like a fairy tale. It's actually just like, these Hollywood movies that people, I'm sure you have when you're a kid, a teenager, you have, that figure, the Hollywood that you really admire.
Icon.
It's the same thing. You know what they do? They actually target girls at the universities. And in one case, actually not one, several, they actually have gone to these girls, gotten their email addresses, started engaging them, and then they go and tell them that, there are no more pious men, good men, faithful men in your country. The only place you can get them is in the caliphate areas in Syria. And then all of a sudden they send that very naive girl, a picture of a very handsome young man in wherever they call, in Iraq or Syria, and then confuses this young girl, and after a short time, you hear a girl moving out of Kenya or Somalia, going to look for this man, a Hollywood kind of a warrior in the jihadist battlefield, and they go. The Kenyan girls who have actually left, some have come back and regretted their very action of trying to go and get married to some warrior who then would start life with and join a family. So they are lied to, and in their naivety they actually fall for this kind of lies. So from grievance to these fairy tales of confusion that they bring to people who are traumatized, and there's that moment, a person wants to exert revenge, and Dr. Gidua would be the right person to speak about those traumatic situations where the young people want to exert revenge, and the only way to exert revenge is to join these terror groups. There is no single pathway to being radicalized into extremism and joining terrorism.
They explore all possibilities.
Absolutely.
Every individual is different.
Absolutely.
And then we look at your life, they study you, and they want to use what will work for you to join them. Before you know it, you're actually part of a terror group.
Correct. Yeah. And because the Kenyan government, the National Counter-Terrorism Center and other agencies have done such a wonderful job in preventing recruitment in the traditional areas that terrorists have been recruiting in in Majengo, Mombasa, Nairobi here, just across. What they've done is now to actually extend their pools. They are going up country. They are recruiting more people now in non-traditional recruitment areas and change their tactics. And so the county action plans that Dr. Gidua talked about has really helped in preventing these groups from going into those non-traditional areas. Of course, more work needs to be done, and it's always work in progress. These terrorists continue to update and refine their strategies, and we need to not just take this on, but also go on the offensive so that they are always on their back foot.
All right. It's good that you've touched on what NCTC is doing, across the country to manage terror. You've told me that when they're recruiting and when they're looking for members, they actually go to these ordinary spaces where young men are spending their time, the religious centers. Are we also in those areas in terms of countering this, as even as NCTC is traversing the country with information and mitigation measures? Are we going to these places, the ground, as the young people would call it?
Well, and that is a beautiful thing about what we're doing now, because the idea had always been that, we react at the point where an attack has happened, and then now it's all about the investigation, it's all about profiling the family of the person, it's about profiling the person. But then you have to be proactive, and recruiters are proactive, and these spaces where young people flourish in are exactly where they are. The thing is, will we allow recruiters to be the ones who set the narrative for young people on the ground, or are we going to take over that narrative? So what is happening right now is that we are going to those places around the whole country, setting a different narrative. So in fact, we discovered that if we spend a lot of our energy and time in countering narratives, then you're not going to do really a lot of work only on that space alone. It has to be backed up by having alternative narratives that are more powerful than the ones that are presented by the recruiters. So what does that mean? It means that you have to engage young people, and that's what I was talking about, the strategy for countering violent extremism. You have to engage people with media, with the arts. You have to engage them also with things like online activities and being online with them, engaging with them on Twitter and doing all of that. It's also about what Dr. Mustafa said so expertly and really accurately about the grievances, knowing those grievances and getting on them before they become a narrative in themselves. Because it's true that, our country is not perfect, but there's no country that's perfect. And actually we're building towards a better country. And the way we can actually work together is by getting ahead of the recruiters to not use whatever is a natural human process as a reason for anybody to join a terror group. So what we do is we talk, we contextualize the issues, we spend time with young people, we find community champions in the community who actually become our champions on the ground. So you don't have to, I like what you said, it's true. No recruiter comes and tells them, hey, do you want to join Al-Shabaab?
Is that obvious?
Nobody does that. What they'll do is they'll come and they befriend them, they'll create, there's something very unique about human beings and bonds. So the people you are really bonded to are the people who are really going to determine how you act. So they come and make sure that the bond they have with you is so tight that whatever they say, you'll do just because you believe them. And then again, human beings are conformists. We like to conform with people we admire. Conform to people we admire. So if I admire the recruiter because he dresses well, he's promised me love. And in fact, Dr. Mustafa talked about it really well. Young girls are right now being told, you want love? You want to marry a lion. A faithful lion. Not these Kenyan men out here. That's an appealing, as light a moment as that may be. Remember, love is not religion. And you see, that's the thing that people don't understand. They use human things and then later on politicize the religion or religionize the politics. And that's what ends up happening later. And many times you don't even know you're part of the group until you're there, and then you can't even leave. And so you find a lot of the young girls who've gone end up becoming mistreated, abused, and being really taken advantage of when they're away from home. And of course, when they come back, it's really a horrific situation. But I think the work is now, and you're right, we're optimistic because we're now starting to learn. Now we know a bit more. We know more than what we used to know 8 years ago. And so our strategies are now more practical. They're on the ground. They're not theoretical and up here in a way that Kenyans cannot relate with them. Yes.
The reason I ask that is I hope it's not in some formal physical office somewhere. Yet the young people are meeting in pubs, in religious centers, in school, in football clubs. That is where they are. And that is where they open up and they talk about some of the grievances they're going through.
In fact, Daesh used to chide the Americans in 2015. Your programs are stuck in 5-star hotels in Washington, London, Brussels, but they are busy recruiting in Majengos and in the slums. And it's true. Then these guys were running roughshod over our young people. They had mastered the art of recruitment. Well, people were busy with strategies and all that. You know, it was about the elite discussing about radicalization and terrorism in 5-star hotels. But now this debate is inside the village, inside Majengo. It is basically owned by the people.
Yes.
Their messaging is sort of heroic. You feel like you're doing something good. You're sacrificing yourself for a bigger cause. How should the counter messaging be framed? Because when a young person has been recruited, they actually feel like they're the heroes of the day. They're doing something for a good cause. How should the messaging to counter that be framed?
Well, I think for me that's really a good observation, and I think that is one of the gaps we have that we really need to take advantage of. I don't know if you know, when NYS were rebranding, they rebranded into the new NYS, and one of the things they did, they had a campaign about service to self, service to country, which I think was one of the most amazing campaigns that I've seen. In fact, as a result of that recruitment drive for NYS, applicants went up by about 733% in increasing. It shows that young people would love to serve in a kind of a heroic way, to do something that's beyond themselves, to actually serve the country in a bigger way than we do. So when you find the recruitment videos, which we have seen, and I know Daktari has seen as well, they actually have that heroic kind of a thing and telling you, abandon what you're doing, come and join us, look at this jihad, of course, using the jihad term very loosely and inappropriately, dressed in their combat gear and stuff. And so a young person who's vulnerable and has the grievances we're talking about, has already been given all these other things, they're primed for that, and they're primed to actually go and take part in kind of a fight like that. But if we were to do that as a country as well, when we're trying to do that for many things, turn it into service. It's not about the salary you get at the end of the day, but it's about what are you giving your country? Are you contributing as a young person? And that's a really big challenge that you've thrown out there. And I really like it, because whenever we go to speak to people, I always show those adverts next to each other, and I say, look at them. What's the difference? They've actually used exactly the same tactics a big PR company or big advertising company would charge to do it, but on a cell phone. And they have a mass appeal on it. So we need to do that. We need to think about how do we do it as a country in a way that enables young people to achieve their potential, of course within reason, because again, you don't want to tell young people they can do something they don't even have access to doing, but allowing them to express themselves and know that they can contribute to this country. That's why we are sitting here. We were young people at one point who ended up becoming patriots who want to serve the country. It's not because of a salary or anything, but it's because of love of country. And we hope that we can actually inspire a generation that be below us and younger than us, and to actually have them become patriotic, to do something bigger than themselves.
What is the role of the family in this whole equation? What is the most fundamental thing that the family unit needs to do to safeguard our young people as we manage terror in the country?
Family is critical. In fact, I dare say the family is one of the most critical elements in the fight against radicalization into extremism and terrorism. Children always look up to their parents as mentors. The family is a space where they are loved and they can also love back, where they are nurtured. And if that space is broken, then already you see a broken relationship starting, children feeling unloved, not cared for, and they will look for this love somewhere else. I visited El Salvador city, San Salvador, which is known as the murder capital of the world. And when you look at the children, the way they grow up, and we saw some who had joined the gangs that ended up murdering people in that city, the Mara Salvatierra, the M13 and MS13, the MS18. They actually told us that they found more love, more care, that they were more loved, more cared for in the gangs than in their families, which maybe the husband and wife had separated. And that is the beginning of the problem. And this is something that we need to safeguard. The family, our faith communities, our religious communities focus a lot on family. And we need to build the family resilience. The family resilience, so that children do not find solace or love or more care outside the family.
Correct. Nice. They get identity, they get acceptance. That is where they feel valued, they feel respect, they feel like they are doing something important. Maybe their background, where they come from, they've always been told how useless they are, they cannot achieve anything, they can't go far. And here they are, they find a space where they're actually very pivotal in the group. That could be, a fueling factor. Let's talk about the media, because we are trying to paint a picture of progress here. And I want us to understand what role they play in helping us better manage terror attacks in our country. What is it that you feel the media can do to begin changing the narrative before an attack, during an attack, and even post an attack? What should the media do right? And include there what they've been doing wrong.
Well, I think I'll begin by applauding the changes that I've seen in the media. First of all, there's a huge difference between covering Westgate 2013 and covering 14 Riverside Complex attack 2019. I believe that media houses and the owners and the editors, I think, are really learning a lot based on feedback and also engagement with government agencies, including NCTC, who've been engaging with the Media Council of Kenya as well as with journalists directly. That there's actually two things that are happening when during an attack. Number one, if you cover that event in a way that actually shows how much damage the terrorists have caused, what you're doing is basically giving free advertisement. I think my brother and I, Dr. Mustafa, were talking about that. I don't know how much you guys at KBC charge for 30 seconds of advertising, but think about that number and then multiply that by every 30 seconds of negative coverage of that item. So think of it in...
That is what they want, the terror group?
Oh, yeah, they want, of course, it's free advertisement. They didn't have
rolling coverage.
It's rolling
That's
coverage.
What they want.
Yeah, and by the way, remember that we said that terrorism is not about the target that they hit. It's about the message they're sending to policymakers, as well as the fear they instill. So the second part of this is that the more it's covered from a terror perspective, that we are helpless, we are dying, we've been killed, security, the system is not working. The more you're doing that, the more Kenyans are actually left vulnerable, and the more terrorized they become, and the more trauma they experience.
So are you suggesting a blackout? I mean, people would still want to know what's going on.
No, absolutely not. You cannot kill the fourth estate's right to cover media. And I think that media is important, even in terms of, warning people to avoid certain areas when that is happening, so that people don't go and like in 1998, I believe there was a question of going close to the American embassy, and we don't know what perils were there. We didn't know what was happening. Or in 2013, people going to be around Westgate, you don't even know what's happening or if the situation is controlled. So it's not about media blackout. It's about a sensitive coverage of the issue. Talking about that, yes, we're in the middle of an attack, but the security apparatus are in control of the situation, which they are in control of the situation. Because the more you cover it, guess what happens? The case of 2013, all media houses in Kenya were covering Westgate, but then also Al-Shabaab in their media, in their Twitter handle, were talking about, look at us, look at the Mujahids walking around and they're doing all these good things, and wow, look at how afraid they are. They were achieving their goal of really inflicting more pain. But without really knowing, it's not just about that attack, it's about our way of life and dissuading Kenyans from going to shop at malls, and then also inflicting terror, which is their ultimate goal, the hearts and minds of Kenyans, saying, then can't we just leave Somalia, because if this is what's going to happen to, you see, by the time you're talking like that,
the pressure is mounting on the government.
By the time,
and why don't we just leave,
But you see, the government is not run through social media. People don't know that there are arms of government. You're talking about the foreign affairs questions that you have to bring into space, the security questions that you have to consider. You have to consider so many things, diplomatic channels. By the time you come to decisions about a country either withdrawing or entering into an act of war, I don't think that there's any country that really wakes up in the morning and says, I'd like to go to war. It's an expensive affair, both in terms of infrastructure, resources, and lives. So that's not really anybody's goal. But what I'm saying is that media has really changed. And I think what could improve, based on what we've seen, is just saying that, can we have more sensitive coverage? That the reporters who are on the ground to be careful for themselves as well. I think we've engaged with media practitioners as well, who've ended up being traumatized themselves. Because now you come from...
in fact, you see the raw. You see it live.
So you're there.
Not through the camera lens.
Exactly. So you're there, and then you're traumatized by what you're seeing. Then as soon as you leave there, you're dispatched by your editor to go and cover Baragoi. And you're the same person. Nobody has given you any psychological first aid. Nobody has talked to you psychologically. So you end up piling up all these trauma. So what happens to the quality of news you're going to be giving after some time? It goes down. And so I'm sure there are colleagues in the media field who are now suffering a lot of traumatic symptoms, and they're drinking more, they're domestic squabbles, issues, divorce, issues like those. So it affects everybody, not only the viewers, including the people, the practitioners. The media houses themselves will be affected, and the families will be affected. So what I'm asking for, and what I'm saying that the country can do better, especially in the media space, cover it sensitively, be careful, and actually get help for yourselves as well as you're doing the work. And that way we'll at least protect everyone, because after all, aren't media practitioners Kenyans?
Yeah, true.
Right?
So go for a debrief session after that assignment?
Absolutely.
Because you had women screaming, children running here and there. You saw dead bodies. I mean,
traumatizing.
It's traumatizing for you even as a journalist. That's a good point you've said there. Is there anything you'd like to add there on the role of the media as well?
Dr. Gidua has said it very well. Just to underline what he has said, and we need to always have this at the back of our mind, the journalists should understand that terrorism is a spectacle. And the way terrorists calculate their actions, they actually incorporate the time when between the first and the second attack, knowing that the journalists will have arrived and there will be live coverage. In 9/11, the second plane to hit the Twin Tower hit after 30 seconds. Al-Qaeda had calculated that CNN will actually be covering that live. And it actually did cover that live. So they're not stupid people, they know. And they calculate, they make it in their calculation, including the timing. Which plane are they going to hijack and move it around so that it hits the second tower?
Do they have like their internal, board or something? Let me call it.
If you can allow me.
Just take us into that world.
I think the biggest mistake anybody would make is to assume that terror groups are ragtag organizations. And if you want to make a mistake, underestimate your enemy. And the number one thing I can tell media practitioners, Al-Kataib Media is a fully fledged media arm of Al-Shabaab. And these are people who have degrees in journalism. These are people who actually understand how to do in and out cuts, panning, camera. They actually produce, I don't know if you've seen any of their videos, but they now produce them to world-class levels of production. And it's only that now they're used for those nefarious means and actually very negative outcomes. The idea is that you cannot underestimate them and think that all they are consisted of are guys holding guns. No, they have think tanks. They have financiers. It's a whole network. They have families. They have people who hide people. In a book called 39 Ways to Join the Jihad, which is a complete thing, one of the artifacts found after Osama bin Laden's raid, you find that they actually have other people who are part of the network that you'd never have thought about. Family members, people who will hide someone who's hurt, and you'll never ever suspect them of something. So I think the one thing I can also advise us as a country is to say that we do not underestimate our enemy, and we actually have to vamp up all our systems. And luckily, right now with the National Counterterrorism Center, the multi-agency approach, the use of all the security agencies, as well as consultants and people who work in that space, is really a good start in managing this issue, because we cannot underestimate the enemy in any way.
Yeah,
wow.
and
Really nice.
you know, these sophisticated groups. They don't need to be there all the time. They need to carry out one attack after a long time to just announce that they are still relevant.
Correct.
And it's much cheaper to organize an attack. So in an asymmetric sense, the cost asymmetry, countries, states have to maintain armies, security agencies, surveillance and all that. The terrorists have just to send one sleeper cell to go and deliver a bomb somewhere. And they will announce their presence. And because they know the media will cover that and will keep on covering it again and again and again. The DHL bomb that emanated from Yemen way back, it costed about $4,000. To put it, is it in a printer and put it on a plane, and what was the cost of lost business, because all cargo planes heading to Europe were grounded for some time, millions of dollars, actually billions of dollars. So you can see that asymmetry of cost, and that it's much easier for the terrorists to carry out their business, and much more expensive for states, communities, populations to actually deal with that. And so eternal vigilance is something that we always have to have at the end, at the back of our mind.
I want us to talk about, those who are in these groups, and I want to believe there are some who want out. Whether as a country we have an exit strategy and safety mechanisms to restore and rehabilitate our young people who could be wanting out at this particular moment, and what we've done with that regard. But very quickly, Dr. Githua, in the event that you found or you're caught up in that chaotic terrorist attack, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of things are happening at that particular point. What do you do as somebody who is caught up in that? Maybe you went shopping and you found yourself in that. Okay. Yeah, what do you do?
So, of course, we're speaking here of innocent bystanders, right? The first thing you do is your safety first. And if you have a way of getting away from the situation, from the scenario, please do. Number one, don't try to be a hero. And the reason I'm saying that is because you do not know what they have in their presence and what they're going to be using to attack you with. Number one. Number two, the idea of allowing the security agencies to do their work. It's very important to actually just comply with what you're asked to do. If they tell you, lift your hands up, please do it. There's a reason why they're doing that. And it's not the time to start becoming philosophical and saying, I have rights to do this and the other. In the middle of an imminent attack, it's important to allow the professionals that we have in this country to handle it and to do it well. And now they've been trained, they're trained way better than anybody else that I know to actually handle those situations. And number three, if you see anything, of course, it's important that once you're in safety to report what you've seen, and also just to get away as far as possible from that situation. Now, the other thing that I would actually ask people is that look for any help that might be available for you. Because in as much as you may imagine that you probably don't have any effects at that moment, there's a question of adrenaline running through your blood at that time, that you may feel like you're good and you're strong, but then you actually start having some problems. The reason why we do that is to actually log you, to have you in our database, to work with you, just in case any complications come up, at no cost to you as well. I think that the strategy of the government as we speak is to actually take care of all Kenyans who are affected in an attack like that, in an imminent attack. So I think for me, that's the one thing that I would tell people, that right now the government cares, and actually, I think it's not that the government didn't care, it's that there were no mechanisms in the past to actually be able to work on working with people who are survivors of attacks like those. And also the same thing with young people who've been caught up in this and probably got radicalized and they didn't really know what was happening. I believe that the government right now is opening up the road. The late former CS and Kaiseri talked about an amnesty program, where that if you're a Kenyan who's abroad and who's been engaging in this, you can come back home and actually go through a process. Of course, what I'm talking about is come be processed through the security mechanisms, because you have to be processed. We have to know who's coming back. But then, you know, once you're taken through that, you'll go through a process of disengagement, which also just means, you know, stopping contact with these people, stopping the ideas of interacting with them. And then you go through other processes, including psychosocial support, de-radicalization, and also working with you to actually rehabilitate you to become a citizen of Kenya who can be productive. This may happen if you're locked up, or it might actually happen in society if you are actually deemed to be safe to be there. So I think that right now we do not need to be scared as Kenyans. There are ways that the government is putting in place to actually deal with people who are both affected in the sense of being at the presence of the attack, and also if you have been unfortunately been carried away when you've gone and joined these groups. I think that the government now has mechanisms that we can actually use to work with young people who've been caught up in it and help you until you're actually much better.
Is there anything you'd like to add there, Mustafa?
Yeah, to appeal to young people. I would like to appeal to young people who have been caught up in these groups. You are better off back in your communities in the hands of the government security agencies, because they now have strategies to actually help them to reintegrate back into societies. Many of them were caught up in this. Some did not even understand what they were getting in.
Correct.
And they need to know that they are better off back processed through the security agencies than to remain in the terrorist groups. It's just a dead end, a dead end being in a terrorist group.
All right, we will be coming back in a bit. I like how we've gone so far as we mark 8 years since the 2013 Westgate mall attack that left almost 70 people dead and several others injured. Others are nursing even emotional wounds till date. We are talking about the triumphant journey of, you know, healing as a nation and the progress we've made in managing terror in our country. That's our conversation this morning. We are taking a very short break. We'll be coming back with much more. Don't go too far. Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, this is News Check, in case you're just joining us. We're just about to climax the conversation we've been having in studio today as we commemorate the Westgate mall attack 8 years now. What we have been doing here is just to walk that journey and sort of look at what we have learned as a country and what we have done better as we move on to win the war against terror in our country. And in studio, I've been engaging a panel of two gentlemen, Dr. Oscar Githua, forensic psychologist, and also Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali. He's the Secretary General of the Global Network of Religion for Children. Thank you so much for staying on, gentlemen. We're just about to wind up, and today this conversation is also coming at a time when we are marking the International Day of Peace. And I just want us to look at the way forward as a country. What do you think, you know, in this road is some of the things we should be expecting in the coming days that ought to change the narrative in how we manage terror, first of all, and how we can have a society that is centered on peace and living together as brothers and sisters, understanding each other in as much as we may be having diverse opinions. How do we get to that point? Let me start with you, Dr. Githua.
Thank you so much. For me, I want to talk about the family, because that's where Kenyans can actually do something themselves. That our families are the beacon of our success. And I think that if we actually manage our families better and our relationships within our families better, then I think that we can actually fight violent extremism and terrorism at a bigger scale. As disconnected as those two ideas may look or seem, it's actually not really true, because of the conversation we've had also with Dr. Mustafa here, that the young people who are targeted often come from vulnerable families. So my idea is to say that as Kenyans, let's come together in our families. Let's heal our families first, and then actually after we heal our families, we're not going to actually have a chance for recruiters to come and actually target our children and take them away. And also that now Kenya has a strategy to actually counter this violent extremism, and that every county is included in this. It's not about government dictating to people, but it's actually people coming together and deciding what are those things that they need to work on themselves as communities to actually rid themselves of it. So I think for me is to say there's a lot of optimism, a lot of hope coming ahead, and because the terrorism is still imminent amongst us, we actually need to be careful that we don't put our guards down just because we don't have any recent attacks, but just to realize that it's not really an event, that violent extremism is not an event, it's actually a process. And what we have to do is to put all our efforts around reducing its occurrences. Thank you so much.
Daktari?
We need to appreciate and congratulate the men and women who are in the forefront of fighting terrorism. We need to encourage them to continue in this war and lay very firm foundations to address the very ideological foundations for terrorism in order to not allow the threat to continue to mutate. And secondly is a refocus on the child and the family. There's a wise seer who once said that if we are ever going to realize a real and true peace in this world, we are going to have to start with children.
All right.
Thank you.
For them who were involved in that terror attack and the others that have happened after, it's coming from a very personal space. As we mark this anniversary, what do you tell them? Others have healed, turned their sky into purpose. Others have not. What do you tell them?
To not lose hope. That actually help might not have come when they required it, but help is on the way. And I think that it's important for anybody who might have been affected to probably reach out, and especially on Twitter. I can probably give out NCTC's Twitter handle, which is CS Mechanism, at CS Mechanism. And I think for me, it's important because those engagements that are personal are going to actually lead to them being seen and being talked to by somebody who's qualified to talk to them. And because it's not easy to heal trauma that comes from being caused by another human being. So I think for me, don't lose hope. There's hope that's coming your way.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you, for creating time. We're not allowing because of time. Thank you so much. Dr. Oscar Githua, forensic psychologist, and also Dr. Mustafa Yusuf Ali, the SecGen of Global Network of Religions for Children. We were talking about the gains we have had as a country as we mark 8 years since the Westgate mall attack, and we've also touched on other terror attacks and what they've taught us and how we are doing it different as a country right now.